Hello, this is my presentation on tort liability in education, and the first thing we need to do is clear up what exactly a tort is. So a tort is an actionable or civil wrong committed against one person by another that is independent of contract. So for us, if an injury occurs as a result of the actions of school personnel, liability charges may be imminent. So liability may result from deliberate acts committed by another or acts just not on purpose, but just due to negligence. So here is a particular case in which we saw a negligence of supervision. This is Brodacek versus Millard School District. Darlene Brodacek, who is the mother of the student here, brought a wrongful death action against the defendant school, Mallard School District, because her son died following an accident in PE class. Her son David, 14-year-old ninth grader, was at in the gym there at Millard Junior High and was struck in the head by a golf club by a fellow student, Mark Cray. The strike rendered him unconscious, and he died 2 days later after never regaining consciousness. And what had happened was that there had been a rain due to inclement weather. They'd brought the activity inside. They'd set it up so that the girls were facing one direction in the gym toward the north, and the boys were facing another direction. I believe it was toward the south, and everybody else was seated in the middle of the gym along the half-point line. There were two teachers in the room, but one of them was a student teacher and was kind of distracted by providing instruction to a single student. David had been absent the day before to miss some safety instructions and also just basic instruction on the game of golf. And when Mark stepped in to help him, took a couple of practice swings to kind of help him up, and David stepped forward, and during stepping forward, Mark swung through and hit him in the head, killing him. Because the administration had made written instructions had been provided by administration, and the setup of the gym went against what that written instruction said. The court found that the district was liable of negligence because of the inattention to duty to exercise care in the situation, which reasonably may be regarded as hazardous, is negligence. And so, because it was golf clubs swinging around, and there was an inattention to the duty, they were found to be negligent. A failure of supervision had occurred in this case. So if in reaction to this, the possible outcomes might have been staff would have been required to participate in safety training. They would have maybe evaluated what sort of activities they might like. Golf would never be allowed in the gym again. Anything having to do with nothing harder than the Nerf ball would be allowed in the gym again. These kinds of things, and then also perhaps being very cautious about how many students would be there. If we're being proactive in this case, though, administration should probably create a list of appropriate activities for similar situations. If there's inclement weather, we should probably have a list of things. These are things that you should do, things that you shouldn't do. And then administration should also put themselves in position to verify that those expectations are being met, because that was one thing that was mentioned in the case, is that the administration put out that notice and then never really checked up on it. The next case we're going to look at here is Rollins versus Concordia Parish School. Lisa Rollins was an elementary school student who fractured her leg when she fell off a merry-go-round during PE. There were 40 students in the class. My understanding is that the substitute teacher that was at play here was actually looking after two different classes. Girls were playing on the playground equipment and boys were at the basketball court. And again, there was a substitute teacher. The substitute teacher noticed that the girls were going too fast in the merry-go-round, so she went over there to tell them that they were going too fast, to slow down and get off. And before her instructions could be followed and met, a little boy ran up and was telling her about a couple of boys that were having a disagreement, an argument over on the basketball court. So she turned around to go and take care of that. She said she turned around for maybe 30 seconds, and then that's when another person came up to tell her that Lisa had fallen. The court found the district, in this case, negligent in its duty of supervision, because even though the teacher recognized the unsafeness of the act, she did not make sure that her instructions were followed. She gave the instruction, but then she didn't verify that those things had been done. A reactive would be to have any unsafe equipment would be removed, right? Like get rid of merry-go-rounds, which we seem to kind of already be doing anyways. Maybe just a homogenization of activities, rather than being able to have one group over here doing something that they like and another group over there doing something that they like. Just everybody has to do the same thing. And then again, a reevaluation of class size numbers and activities with sufficient supervision. Proactive would probably be better off if we, it's in the same thing, but evaluate that class size and ensure that realistic supervision is happening with a realistic ratio of student to supervisor, and then make sure that we train staff to ensure that in the cases of unsafe situations, if we do give those instructions, we make sure that those instructions are being followed before we move on. We shouldn't just give the instruction and then assume that a child is going to do that, because they are children and they don't always behave exactly like we expect them to. The next case was an interesting one. It was Munn versus Hotchkiss School. In this case, Kara Munn and her parents brought suit against the Hotchkiss School after Munn contracted tick-borne encephalitis on a school-organized trip to China. So the group was getting ready to be involved in it. They were going for a month to China to be immersed in Chinese language and culture, and there was going to be several trips to cultural landmarks. Information was sent out. Lots of information was sent out to the students about what to expect, and even some information from the Center for Disease Controls. There was a bad link on that one, however, it sent them to, instead of where they were going in China, sent them to Central America. So there was some miscommunication there. During a trip to Mount Panshan, some students, along with their supervisor, they rode the tram up to the top, and then some of the students decided that they were going to go on their own, Kara being among them. They were going to hike down the trail on their own. Kara admitted that they left the main trail and kind of went on some back trails, maybe even got a little lost and walking through the wilderness. And then a few days later, she was in a Chinese hospital suffering from partial paralysis. And the school was found liable due to the foreseeable nature of this insect-borne illness in the area. So it was a foreseeable accident, and they didn't take the required precautions, warnings, making sure that students stayed in safe places, making sure that students used bug spray, these kinds of things. Those things didn't happen. So in reactive, just creates so much documentation that participants are scared away, right? Just give them so much information and make sure that they know all the scary things are out there that people are like, no, thank you, I don't want to, or then just disallow such trips. Versus if we're proactive, we need to make sure that the information about potential dangers has been presented, and so that they can make their own decisions, but not like hit them with all these liability documents and the scary things. Provide and insist on the use of protected devices, right? Like if we're going into some place that has potential malaria, these things, making sure that we're using appropriate protection, ensure adequate supervision. If a group wants to walk down, cool, make sure an adult's going down with them. And then, that goes along with this, develop expectations that students shouldn't be unaccompanied at any time. The next case is Johnson Johnson versus the School District of Millard. The mother of Robbie Johnson sued the school district after Robbie sustained an injury in the head that required 50 stitches. It was during first grade music class. Robbie's teacher taught the class a new activity called London Bridge, where they sing the song, and one student is swung in the middle between two students who are holding, basically holding hands, and the other student is in the middle, and they acting kind of like a cradle. They were given one demonstration, which involved singing the song, while the two students swung the third with their linked arms. And then during the very first round of the game, Robbie was the first in his group to be in the bridge. The instructor turned her back to the students to ride on the thing. Robbie reported that he asked his group to slow down, to stop, to quit, to let go, and they began to swing him aggressively and more aggressively until they lost control, causing him to crash into that bookshelf and receive those 50 stitches. And again, because the teacher, she's dealing with first graders, so there's more supervision needed for first graders. It's the first time doing an activity. The court found that there was another case of negligence of supervision. The reactive could be requiring, all activities to be in their seats, not allowed to touch each other, or, again, maybe requiring all plans to be vetted by administration, running through everything so that people can make sure that things are going to be safe. Proactive would be to, staff are trained in age-appropriate supervision requirements. I think that's especially true in elementary, especially in electives or specials or whatever they're called. You've got kids from 5 to, how old is sixth grader? 11, and they're going to need various amounts of supervision, and we need to make sure that our staff is trained on who needs what, and then make sure that we're training all staff to be aware of potentially dangerous situations. What seems like a cute little game when you have can quickly become quite dangerous, as it was seen here. The final case is Norman versus the Ogallala Public School District. In this case, David and Susan, who are the parents of Christopher, sued the Ogallala School District after their son suffered second or third degree burns to 10% of his body in welding class. What happened here was that with little experience, Christopher was using an acetylene welder. He was wearing a t-shirt and a long sleeve flannel shirt, but he was not wearing the suggested protective equipment. It wasn't required, it was merely suggested. And that protective equipment, which was suggested, did not include a heavy leather apron. So while he was welding, his shirt caught fire and he sustained those severe burns to his upper body. They were found liable because there was no expectation to wear protective clothing, only recommendation to. There was expert witnesses that testified students were not they weren't properly trained in the need for or the proper use of that protective equipment, and so the school district was found negligent because there is foreseeable danger in using things that spark and fire and young people. Reactive seems pretty clear that in this case we might feel the need to cancel all the types of classes in shop, woodworking, small engine repair, these kinds of things that a lot of kids really kind of need. We might be inclined to cancel them because there's inherent danger, rather than being proactive where we monitor and adjust school policy according to those best practices associated with these hazardous activities, finding out what the trade unions themselves say is best practice, and then following that, then providing that staff with the appropriate training, making sure that the classrooms have all the safety materials that they need, and then monitoring, making sure as administration that we monitor that all those things are being done. So how does the code of ethics help with all this? Well, making sure that we have set out a way that we should be behaving, that we should be monitoring students, that we should be making sure that they are safe. That means that we need to go out and make sure that we've got the best practices that are available. We're seeking those out, and then not only are we seeking them out, but we're making sure that we're sharing those best practices to the supervisors of our students, whether those be hall monitors, teachers, paras, whatever, making sure that everybody gets the best information. And then as administrators, like I've said many times, we need to make sure that those expectations are being met. We cannot just give the expectations and then assume that they're being done. We need to go out and monitor and make sure that those things are being done and retrain as necessary, and then make sure that everyone understands that the care of our dependents is at the foremost of our minds. We always have to be aware of what's going on, aware of the dangers that are around us, aware of the potential hazards, and make sure that we're doing everything that we can to prevent those dangers.